All right, so we are going to get started again on this painting, and now that we kind of have the first layer done, we want to still form out, get the form solidified a little bit more. So just gonna go in. I'm still kind of focusing on bigger, just kind of bigger mid-tone, bigger sections of mid-tones. Looks like I had a little shadow there, not showing up. We want to make sure that our shadows are in the right place and our highlights are as well. So we still want to use those brushes that are not too small in size. To get the form in. So since we have our first layer in, just kind of going back over and get a little blending in there. If you find that your paint is drying, that's okay. That's pretty normal for acrylic paint. You can either add in a medium called acrylic retarder, or what you'll often find yourself doing, which is going to happen regardless, is you're going to just be value matching. So you're going to be looking at values that are really close to the ones that you initially put down. So you're going to have to do a lot of mixing again. And it's going to be close enough when you mix, it should be close enough to where it sort of starts to look like blending. Doesn't always look acutely like that, but we want to get that same idea. So I've got this mid-tone. Say that these were dry. I want to get that mid-tone that meets in there somewhere. So we've got this highlight, and then we've got the darker tone. I'm realizing that I want to make it much darker. Really look at the shape of your shadow. be sure to always be checking in, looking at, observing your still life. Because with this particular project, we're not worrying about colors, in which case values do still exist, but we're just working with tones, so grays, which means that we can focus solely on just matching the values that we're seeing. So the dark and lightness. Still using kind of middle-sized brushes. So cloth can be a little bit hard just because it's so wrinkly. So just pay attention to the major areas where the folds are. So now I'm just really focusing on the different folds that I see happening here. And I'm making my brush strokes go with the flow of the object. So again, that cross contour brush stroke, it's happening. Paint is already drying, so again, gonna have to do some value matching here. Pay attention to your edges too. So remember how light hits an object. We have the highlight right there. And then what we have is the coarse shadow. It's a little bit harder to tell on fabric or objects that undulate, but we have the coarse shadow right here, and then we have the middle tone, and then we start to have a little bit of a dark, slight, very, very slight coarse shadow. And then we can see a little bit of the reflected light as well, coming right here before that cast shadow happens underneath. I'm going to try to avoid the edges, the dry edges here, so you get enough paint down for that. Got a highlight coming up here, right here. I'm going to start defining our folds a little bit more. We don't have to get too precise, but we still want to be adding more paint onto the canvas. So it's really all about just layering, right? So you start with the larger, and then you go in with, you start with those larger tones, and then you go in with some slightly more acutely, slightly more detailed tones. And then you really start to narrow in what you're looking at. So before you get too engrossed in details, try to get that form shaped. So look at your contours. Let's go back to the spool of thread here. Remember, we want to make sure that there's even paint on the whole canvas. So if there's any areas that you notice, that you go back and you notice, oh hey, there's a little bit of canvas showing, and go back and deal with that. Get some paint on there. can always look at your negative space too. So if you notice that things aren't lining up correctly in some areas, go back to your negative space. So the area where there isn't really an object. So the areas between the positive space that you see, and go back and kind of form that. That's going to help you with getting your subject formed correctly, getting your light to hit. So we're getting some more paint on the canvas. Kind of going into our second layer here still. Probably around our second layer here. So it's good to go in. What I would suggest is mix some values before you start to put your brush down. I know that acrylic paint dries fast, but those bigger areas that you know that you're gonna want to paint right away, would get those done, just so that you're not kind of messing with a bunch of different pieces of like a lot of different values, muddying up your palette, things like that. You don't want to have multiple streaks of paint in one area. You want to always hold your brush up to the object that you're painting to. That's the best way to actually match the colors that you're working with. There's no better way than to do it than actually looking at, like, holding up your brush with the color on it and seeing if that matches the value or the tone. Now I'm just going to look in my painting for some areas that maybe haven't gotten enough attention and are sticking out as not finished. Again, you don't have to get detailed quite right away. Like super fine details can wait until the end. But what I'm doing is just shaping the piece and looking really at the negative space again. How is that being formulated by the objects that I see? All right, so we've got some good values going here. And we'll want to get a little smoother as we go on. But for right now, we'll take a pause.